My name is Darren Metters, and this is The Revolution. On this channel, we're documenting the American War for Independence exactly as it happened, week by week, 250 years ago in real time. The Revolutionary War is kind of glazed over in history class as a dull, foregone conclusion. A room full of pompous old men, with powdered wigs and feather pens, Valley Forge, Yorktown, freedom. But for the men and women who earned America's independence, it was a turbulent, unpredictable life and death gamble, and they had no idea how it would end. We're going to walk through this conflict as it unfolded, covering the politics, the campaigns, and the human cost on their exact anniversaries in the 250th cycle. Whether it's a week of heavy fighting or tense political intrigue, we'll track it all to show you exactly how the people who fought this war experienced it. So let's get into it. In the first week of July 1776, the men of the Continental Congress were betting their lives and the future of their country on a piece of paper, and they were doing it while losing a war on three separate fronts. The Canadian expedition had resulted in a disaster, the southern frontier was erupting in violence, and in New York, the largest armada in British history was closing in to extinguish the entire experiment. This is the story of the week that changed the world, a week where the Founding Fathers moved from political dissidents to traitors of the crown, officially committing themselves to a war they were already losing. This is the Revolution. Going into the summer of 1776, there was no we. Not really. Under the shadow of the British fleet, New York was paralyzed, its delegates silent, waiting for instructions from their home government that refused to come. Pennsylvania was tearing itself apart in backroom arguments, with key figures still holding out for reconciliation. South Carolina was a hard no, and Delaware was a stalemate. Let's rewind for a minute. On June 7th, Richard Henry Lee of Virginia formally introduced the Lee Resolution to the Second Continental Congress, proposing that the colonies do three things: declare independence, seek foreign alliances, and establish a confederation. But the measure was delayed until July 1st because a fractured Congress lacked the necessary consensus. Many delegates were still bound by strict instructions from their home colonies that forbade them from supporting a break with Britain. During this 3-week cooling off period, they also appointed the Committee of Five to draft a formal justification for independence to present to the world. This strategic pause allowed the colonies to align their political will. However, when the Congress reconvened on July 1st, a trial vote still found the colonies unwilling to present a unified front, with 9 colonies in favor, 2 against, 1 divided, and 1 abstaining. To the world, and specifically to potential allies like France, a house divided looked like a failed rebellion, not a new nation. They didn't just need a majority, they needed the political legitimacy of a unanimous declaration. They needed to speak with one voice to be taken seriously as a sovereign power. And there was a ticking clock. The British fleet was already on the move. For those who wanted this revolution, the first 2 days of July were a masterclass in high-stakes political arm twisting. Pro-independence leaders like John Adams and Benjamin Franklin worked tirelessly behind the scenes to flip the holdout delegations. It was a frantic, calculated race against the clock to force a consensus before the British threat could shatter the attempt entirely. In South Carolina, it was a battle of peer pressure. Despite their original opposition after the brazen British attempt to capture Charleston on June 28th at the Battle of Sullivan's Island, their delegates were convinced that the time for reconciliation had vanished and that a unified front was the only way to ensure the survival of their cause. Meanwhile, New York's delegates were still paralyzed by their home government's original mandate to seek reconciliation with Britain. With the British fleet threatening New York City, the provincial government was focused on transitioning its operations to White Plains. In the critical days surrounding the July 2nd vote, they struggled to reach the quorum necessary to issue updated instructions. Unable to break their existing legal mandate without authorization, the delegates opted to abstain, allowing the resolution to pass 12-0. Spoiler alert, the matter was resolved on July 9th when the body finally reached a quorum in White Plains, officially endorsed the declaration, and authorized their delegates to sign. A week late. But we still love you, New York. In Pennsylvania, the struggle was internal and fierce. John Dickinson had spent months debating John Adams and holding out against his fellow Pennsylvanian patriot, Benjamin Franklin. He and Robert Morris voted against independence on the July 1st trial vote. Dickinson and Morris weren't loyalists. They just believed earnestly that declaring independence before securing a formal military alliance with France or Spain was reckless. Dickinson famously warned his fellow delegates that they were braving a storm in a skiff made of paper. After that trial vote, the pro-independence leaders made it clear that a fractured vote would ruin America's chances of ever getting help from Europe. If France and Spain saw that a major colony like Pennsylvania was divided, they would never risk sending money or ships. Dickinson and Morris realized they were trapped in a corner. They had two choices on July 2nd. Vote no and keep their state aligned with their personal beliefs but destroy colonial unity, or vote yes and support a declaration they believed was dangerously premature. They ultimately decided that secret option C, stepping out of the room, was the only honorable path. It allowed them to stick to their principles without sabotaging the birth of the new nation. While Dickinson and Morris would abstain from the vote for independence, both men would go on to serve the revolutionary cause, Morris through substantial donations and Dickinson by serving in Washington's army. But maybe the most theatrical deadlock was in Delaware. The delegation was split right down the middle, a paralyzed tie that rendered their state's voice useless. And the final piece of the puzzle, the solution to Delaware's tie, became a defining symbol of this last-minute jockeying in Congress, the ride of Caesar Rodney. Caesar Rodney was not present when the Continental Congress took its trial vote on July 1st, attending to local military and political responsibilities back home in Dover and battling chronic health issues. After receiving an express message from his fellow delegate Thomas McKean that he was needed in Philadelphia to break the deadlock, and despite his health issues, Rodney rode 80 miles across his home state, according to legend in a thunderstorm, and arrived in time to cast his vote for independence. When he stepped into the chamber on July 2nd, the stalemate was effectively over. His arrival provided the deciding vote for Delaware, finally allowing the delegation to break its tie. The political maneuvering had paid off. With one voice, the United States had declared its independence on July 2nd. But that very same day, while the Congress is declaring a new nation, the largest expeditionary force in British history is dropping anchor, unopposed, off Staten Island, with well over 100 ships and 9,000 British regulars, with more on the way. Even before the British had evacuated Boston back in March, Washington and his generals had already deduced the enemy's next move, accurately predicting that when the fleet struck back, it would be at New York City. Both commands recognized the port as the key to controlling the Hudson River and thus the northern colonies. With the massive British fleet looming just off the New York coast, the lawmakers needed reassurance. Washington gave them absolute steel. He didn't promise an easy victory. He promised to make the enemy bleed for every inch of dirt. On July 10th, he would write to Congress. They will have to wade through much blood and slaughter before they can carry any part of our works, if they carry them at all, and at best be in possession of a melancholy and mournful victory. After the bold action of declaring independence, it was exactly what Congress needed to hear. But it was a mask. Weeks earlier, long before the public bravado, Washington had already seen the storm coming, and privately, he was more clear-eyed about the stakes. Writing to his brother John on May 31st, he stripped away the armor and revealed his deepest anxieties about the reality of the situation. We expect a very bloody summer of it at New York and Canada, and I am sorry to say that we are not, either in men or arms, prepared for it. When he's writing Congress, he's playing the part of commander-in-chief well, but with his brother, Washington isn't playing politics. He's calculating probabilities, and the math doesn't look good. In Philadelphia, the Congress is declaring a new world. In New York, Washington's just trying to survive the next few weeks. Meanwhile, upstate, the invasion of Canada has not only failed to achieve its objectives, but the entire front is on the verge of collapse. Reports arriving in Philadelphia detailed smallpox, hunger, and a chaotic retreat. The remnants of the Northern Army were scrambling to regroup at Fort Ticonderoga, while the egos of Benedict Arnold and Horatio Gates clashed. In the South, the threat was equally grim. The Cherokee, pushed to their limit by encroaching colonists and encouraged and supplied by British agents in arms, began raiding frontier homesteads and mobilizing to launch coordinated attacks that would force the southern colonies to focus toward existential survival on the edge of the wilderness. This violence, combined with the recent British attack on Charleston, left the region stunned and looking over its shoulder. By the end of the first week of July, the ink is dry. The war was no longer a distant conflict confined to Boston Harbor. The 13 colonies have officially joined forces and thrown down the gauntlet against the most powerful empire on earth. The delegates have moved from political dissidents to the leaders of a rebellion. But this wasn't a sudden, unified transformation. It was a slow, agonizing realization that there was no longer a path back to the crown. The Declaration of Independence has been proclaimed, and the war is only starting. As we move into the second week of July, the reality of the situation is about to collide with the might of the British Empire. George Washington receives word of the Declaration in New York. An angry mob tears down a statue of King George III. The intense conflict unfolds in the southern backcountry, and we'll look forward to the full arrival of Admiral Howe's massive fleet, which is about to change the stakes of the war entirely. History's moving fast, and we're going to cover it all. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single update as these events reach their 250th anniversary. We'll see you next week.